Today on Beat Diabetes, we're going to share a different kind of testimony of overcome diabetes. The mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, has written a book about how he overcame diabetes with a plant-based diet. Is that too good to be true? Eric Adams is the mayor of New York City and has written a book detailing how he beat diabetes through a plant-based diet. Now, he actually wrote the book before he was mayor. I found that very interesting, and I downloaded the book on my Kindle to learn his story, and today I'll share that story and a few of my thoughts about it. Eric Adams, by the age of 56, developed diabetes about as bad as it's possible to have it. In a short time, he lost much of his eyesight to the point where his ophthalmologist told him he should turn in his driver's license. His sight was so poor he was not fit to be driving on the road. When he went to a regular doctor to see what in the world was going on, he found out he had severe diabetes with an A1C of 17. You heard that right, 17, about as bad as it ever gets until you die from diabetes or go into a coma. He had a painful stomach ulcer and neuropathy in his hands and his feet. Now, his doctor did not give him much encouragement. He told him that he was lucky he was not in a coma and prescribed insulin along with several other diabetic medications. Eric was told he'd be on them the rest of his life. But Eric Adams was a fighter, and he was determined not to go softly into the diabetic night predicted by his doctor. He went on Google and typed in the words reversing diabetes and ran across doctors saying you could indeed reverse diabetes and get much better, even go from diabetic levels to non-diabetic levels. Now, the doctors and the testimonies he initially encountered were preaching a plant-based whole foods diet. Eric was particularly impressed by Drs. Neil Bernard and Caldwell Esselstyn. Within a short time, he and his girlfriend ended up going to a seminar led by Dr. Esselstyn. Hearing the whole foods plant-based gospel preached nonstop throughout that seminar, Eric Adams became a convert. He and his girlfriend came home and threw out all the meat and the dairy products in the refrigerator, as well as tossing all the sugary snacks and processed foods like chips. They began to faithfully follow the whole food plant-based diet. He bought a plant-based recipe book and Googled plant-based recipes and soon found meals he enjoyed. Along with dropping meat and dairy, all foods and snacks with added sugar, and all processed foods like the corn chips, potato chips, pretzels, bagels, and white bread, all of these things were dropped. He did eat fruits, but he cut down on the fruits that were highest in sugar, even at one point cutting a date in half, just so he wouldn't get as much sugar. Eric's results were spectacular. Within 3 weeks, his sight returned to normal. Within 3 months, his neuropathy had disappeared and his A1C dropped like a stone from 17 down to 5.7, the very bottom rung of prediabetes. And Eric was convinced he had found the fountain of youth. He became one of the most vocal promoters of the whole plant-based diet in the public arena. In New York City, he became instrumental in causing the public schools to adopt Meatless Mondays, and he gave lectures about his victory over diabetes. He also wrote a book titled Healthy at Last. So, what are we going to say about all of this? Most of you watching this video know that the whole foods plant-based approach is not how I conquered diabetes in my life, nor is that the approach I would recommend. So how do I explain Eric Adams' obvious success using this plant-based approach to defeat diabetes? Well, the first thing I'll say is that Eric Adams has certainly achieved a wonderful thing in lowering his A1C and reversing his diabetic symptoms, and I congratulate him. I don't have any doubt that this approach has worked well for him and that he has done himself a world of good by changing his diet. Nor is he the only one that this kind of diet has worked for. Dr. Neil Bernard is a vegan doctor who promotes a very low-fat, plant-based diet for reversing diabetes, and he's written a book titled Dr. Neil Bernard's Program for Reversing Diabetes. And if you look at the reviews under his book on Amazon, you'll find lots and lots of positive reviews, some of which rave about how great this book is. Of course, many of these were already vegans before buying the book, and so they represent the choir. But to be fair, there are more than a few reviews by people who say they were extremely diabetic before reading the book, and after switching to a vegan lifestyle, they have lowered their A1Cs dramatically. On the other hand, sprinkled throughout the book reviews under Dr. Neil Bernard's vegan book are testimonies like these. After 2 months on his program, my blood sugar is worse than ever. I do not recommend this to any diabetic. Another one said, not all people will lose weight, no less stabilize their blood sugar with a high-carbohydrate breakfast of oatmeal, half a cantaloupe, or a whole grain toast. I'm one of them. A breakfast like that spikes my blood sugar horribly. Another person wrote, I read this book and tried the low-fat vegan plan several times. My postprandial numbers were incredibly high after even small amounts of his recommended foods. 200 plus after a small bowl of unsweetened oatmeal or a small serving of beans. I was too frightened to continue. I really wanted this way of eating to work for me, but my numbers were terrifyingly high. Another review said I strictly followed the diet in this book and found that my blood sugar levels were so out of control with spikes at every meal over 200. My opinion is that this is a dangerous diet for those with type 2 diabetes. I really wanted it to work, since I so love carbs. Now, here's a question. What do all of these reviews have in common, the negative ones? And there are plenty of positive ones, but what do the negative ones have in common? These people who criticized Dr. Bernard's approach all knew that these meals spiked their glucose. And how did they know that? Well, they knew that because they tested their glucose an hour or two after eating. And the one thing that almost all of these plant-based promoters have in common is that they almost never encourage diabetics to test themselves. Nor did I see any of this recommendation in Eric Adams' book. Eric goes after meat and dairy pretty hard in his book. He writes, I thought of all those years sitting in my patrol car. He has been a policeman for many years. Before being mayor, he said, I thought of all those years sitting in my patrol car eating buckets of greasy chicken, beef, and pizza, mountains of French fries, ice cream, sundaes. Each and every meal was poisoning my body. My response to that comment is, wait a minute, Mr. Mayor. You're lumping beef with ice cream? You're putting chicken on the same level as French fries? As Shakespeare might say, methinks thou dost protest too much. But of course, he is simply mouthing the words of his guru, Dr. Esselstyn. But let's get to the heart of the matter. If the plant-based diet is inferior to the keto or low-carb diet, as I'm convinced it is, how in the world did Eric Adams get such spectacular results? Well, allow me to share a few thoughts. First, and maybe foremost, the standard American diet is so outstandingly awful that almost any other diet you switch to from that is going to improve things for you. The standard diet tells you to eat both high carb and high fat, and that has proven to be a deadly combination. It would be far better to do either low carb, high fat, or high carb, low fat, than to do the standard diet, which is high carb, high fat. Far better to switch from the standard American diet to a plant-based diet, or a South Beach diet, or a Mediterranean diet, or a paleo diet, a keto diet, or Cousin Billy Bob's chitlins for breakfast, lunch, and dinner diet, than to constantly gorge yourself with donuts and cheeseburgers and ice cream cones and huge pretzels and fried chicken and lasagna. So, when Eric Adams stopped eating the way most Americans eat and switched to a plant-based whole foods diet, he did himself a tremendous favor. A second point is that when you consider what Eric cut out of his diet, much of it was very, very smart. He eliminated processed foods like potato chips, corn chips, pretzels, breakfast cereals, and tortillas. He also eliminated all sugary foods, such as nearly every dessert you can imagine, candy bars, cake, pie, and so forth. So, of course, his blood sugar would improve. It would be shocking and very, very strange if it did not improve. Although Eric will never say this, the truth is he lowered the carbs in his diet significantly by switching from standard to the plant-based. Third, Eric lost 35 pounds over about 3 months. He also started paying more attention to fitness, and judging by this picture, he began lifting weights and becoming far more toned. At 210 pounds before his regimen, he was not morbidly obese, but he was overweight. Losing those 35 pounds is pretty significant. And again, it would be surprising if his blood sugar control did not improve. So why did he lose so much weight? The answer is pretty simple. Before he went plant-based, he ate everything he wanted and everything he liked, which meant everything. High fat, high carb. But once he changed his diet, entire food groups were chopped out of his diet. He took in far less calories and far less food in his daily meals. The weight just rolled off in a big way. And losing weight all by itself, regardless of whatever diet you're on, is a powerful means of lowering your glucose. One thing we need to keep in mind is that no vegan, vegetarian, or low-carber ever attacks diabetes with making only one change to their diet. Eric Adams, like all his plant-based gurus, loves to demonize meat. He writes, Dr. Esselstyn pointed out that many of us could have heart disease and not even know it. In fact, if we've grown up eating foods like chicken, beef, and cheese, it is practically guaranteed. When he was trying to help a friend who had serious heart disease, he told him, Brother, you have to change up the food you eat. You need to cut out animal products and eat only whole plant foods. Notice, he did not tell his friend he had to cut out sugar. Like so many of our plant-based friends, they don't make a big deal about sugar. Their official position on sugar is they don't eat it, but when it comes to what they really want to talk about and criticize and mock, it's rarely the dangers of sugar. They would much prefer to talk about the dangers of meat and animal products such as cheese and eggs. Eric declares that insulin resistance is due to animal fat, writing, when you take a bite of that Big Mac or fried chicken, your body absorbs fat into the bloodstream, further clogging up the insulin keyholes in your cells. Well, this is standard vegan propaganda. The problem with this argument is that vegans get diabetes. I hear from them frequently. And people who eat keto and low carb can go for decades with optimal blood sugar, actually far better than Eric Adams' pre-diabetic A1C of 5.7. Considering how aggressively Eric attacked diabetes with what he felt to be the right diet, if he had applied that same energy to a keto diet, my guess is that he would likely have an A1C in the upper 4s by now instead of a pre-diabetic 5.7. Eric made many changes to his diet and lifestyle in his struggle with diabetes. He gave up meat and cheese, but he also gave up all kinds of processed foods, something with which the keto folks would completely agree. He gave up eggs, but he also gave up sugary foods and desserts, again something the keto folks would approve. He didn't just give up meat and call it a day. He made some radical changes in his diet and in his lifestyle. And when you make multiple changes and then get a positive result, it becomes difficult to know which of those changes made the greatest difference. Let's imagine that you're the friend of a boy who gets beat up every day walking home from school. There's a bully who's always at a certain corner waiting for him, and he gives him a good beating each day. You tell your friend, I can fix your problem. From now on, I want you to make these changes, 5 of them. First, I want you to jump up and down every day for 10 minutes, shouting, hooty-hoo, hooty-hoo. Second, I want you to take a different route home. Don't go the way you've been going. Third, I want you to learn karate and work at it several hours every day. Fourth, I want you to start lifting weights an hour a day. And fifth, I want you to look in the mirror for 20 minutes each day and say over and over, you are one handsome guy. You are a winner and not a loser. So your friend takes your advice. He starts taking a different route home. He jumps up and down 10 minutes a day shouting, hooty-hoo, hooty-hoo. He takes karate lessons. He lifts weights. And he stares at himself in the mirror 20 minutes a day, telling himself he is handsome and he is a winner. Amazingly, your advice works. Your friend never even sees that bully for the next 3 months, except one time when the bully happened to be at a different place. But that time, when they did fight, he defended himself well and sent the bully off crying for his mama. Your friend is elated. He has beaten his adversary. He gets so excited he starts a YouTube channel and gives talks all over the country. But rather than talk about the weightlifting or the karate lessons or the route changing, he focuses entirely on jumping up and down and shouting hooty-hoo, hooty-hoo. He develops a documentary about the jumping and hooty-hooing and writes a book, Victory Over Bullies, which shows pictures and descriptions of the proper way to jump up and down and shout hooty-hoo. Well, what's wrong with that picture? He made several changes, and somehow he focused on precisely the wrong change, ignorantly assuming that jumping up and down and shouting hooty hoo is far more important than weights, karate, and avoiding bullies. He missed the point. I think you get the idea. In my mind, Eric Adams and the whole plant-based high-carb folks have missed the point. Yes, if you cut out the processed food and the sugar and you lose a lot of weight in the process, you will see some pretty spectacular results, and Eric Adams surely did, and that's great. But he could have seen them just as easily by going keto or low carb. Suggesting that animal products are the monster that causes diabetes is ridiculous. Keto folks beat diabetes through keto. They don't get it through keto. How many diabetics do you know that ate a keto diet for years and then suddenly they were diagnosed as diabetic? That happens to vegans. That happens to vegetarians. I've never heard of it happening to someone who is a strict keto eater. I recently interviewed a retired Army major who brought his A1C from 10.4 to 4.8 in 3.5 months. And he did that not by cutting out meat or dairy or cheese, but by cutting out sugar and most carbs from his diet. Or what about me? Diabetes attacked me 20 years ago, and for the last 20 years I've been eating low carb and eating as much meat as I liked. And as the years have rolled by, my A1Cs and my glucose readings are getting better and better. I'm now at around a 4.9 to 5.1 AC, not even close to pre-diabetes. According to many medical experts, diabetes is supposed to get worse and worse the older you get. But strangely, my blood sugar levels are getting better. And I still enjoy hamburgers and chicken and fish and steaks. Am I some kind of a freak? Or are our plant-based friends missing the point that it is sugar, high carbs, and processed food that are the real bad guys? Well, I promised you that I would shock you at the end, so here's the shocker. It turns out that Eric Adams is not quite the most vegan of vegans. Reporters have seen him in restaurants eating fish. And one vlogger wrote this. A restaurant employee told Politico that Eric Adams usually dines on fish and salad, even though the mayor claims he's a vegan and wrote a 224-page book about his food regimen. He's not a vegan. He's a pescatarian, said a staffer who is granted anonymity to speak candidly about the mayor. Wow. Did you catch that statement? He usually dines on fish and a salad. Well, in my mind, that's perfect. That's the kind of meal I would recommend. Fish and salad, or steak and salad, or hamburger and salad, or chicken and salad. Well, here's a word for Eric Adams. First, congratulations, my friend, on getting your A1C down from 17 to 5.7. That is a monumental achievement, and you have a right to be excited and thankful. Second, maybe the reason for your success is not quite what you've assumed and been taught to believe. Maybe instead of forcing the school children of New York City to have meatless Mondays, they should have sugar-free Mondays and carbless Tuesdays and starchless Wednesdays and carnivore Thursdays and bread-free Fridays. We are getting some fantastic feedback on Benedicta's book called When Destiny Calls, her autobiography. It is wonderful to hear how much people are enjoying the book. And you know, the most common thing we hear again and again is, when I started this book, I could not put it down. Many say that they read it in 2 days, and we had one lady tell us that she read it in 6 hours straight from start to finish. So people are really finding a lot of enjoyment and blessing in this book, and I want to guarantee you, as much as one can guarantee, that if you get this book, you're going to be inspired and blessed. And I'm not just saying it because I'm her husband or because I helped her write it. I'm saying this because I know it is true. So, check out Benedicta's autobiography, When Destiny Calls. There's a lot you don't know about her, but you'll find that out in her wonderful autobiography.